Hi everybody, miscellaneous here and welcome back to my channel. This is where I take you to see offbeat, interesting and quirky tourist attractions. Today I have been to the Charterhouse, which is in Smithfield, London. It sits just outside the City of London. A priory has stood here since 1348 and, following the dissolution of the monasteries, it became firstly a school and then almshouses. Come and take a walk in my shoes through the beautiful cloisters. I will go into the chapel, which is known as a peculiar. Finally, we'll step backwards in time through the museum, and we will see a skeleton who was dug up during the Crossrail excavations of 2013. Outside, I will then show you where Hercule Poirot lived. As always, don't forget to click like, don't forget to click subscribe, and hit that notifications bell. I will see you in the video.
Firstly, I'm going to visit the chapel, and here I am underneath the tower, and here's the font. The chapel is still used as a place of worship, and services regularly take place here. As I mentioned, the Charterhouse is a peculiar, which means it's overseen by an ordinary, who is the master and chief executive, rather than the bishop. The preacher is appointed by the governors. The current preacher is a woman, the first female to hold this position. The statue/plaque is dedicated to former Charterhouse pupil and English judge and politician Edward Law. Alumni of the school include diplomats, activists, engineers, historians, academics, business people, members of parliament and even royalty. They are collectively known as Old Carthusians. Behind the Easter scene is the memorial to Thomas Sutton. He is interred here, and he left his fortune to establish an almshouse for 80 impoverished gentlemen and a school for 40 boys. The north aisle here is a later addition and dates from 1614. And the organ dates from 1842. Let's take a look at the history. And from 1348, the Charterhouse has existed on this spot. It takes its name from a Carthusian priory founded in 1371. Carthusian means a religious Catholic order of enclosed monastics and is also known as the Order of Saint Bruno. In 1537, the priory was dissolved under the orders of Henry VIII, but fragments from this period still remain. In 1545, it was rebuilt as a large courtyard house. In 1611, the site was extended when it became a school and almshouse. In 1872, the school moved to Godalming, Surrey, and this part of the building became St Bartholomew's Hospital Medical School, and then its successor, Barts and the London School of Medicine and Dentistry. This section has been much developed over time. In 1941, the building was hit by an incendiary bomb during World War II, which caused extensive damage and a devastating fire. In 1958, Queen Elizabeth II opened the restored Charterhouse buildings. Back to the Thomas Sutton Memorial, and here is a wooden carving. It depicts a preacher preaching to 40 brothers. Could the preacher really be a representation of Thomas Sutton? The Charterhouse continues to serve as an almshouse, which is low-cost community housing held in trust for local people in need of housing, for 40 pensioners known as brothers, who are in need of companionship and financial support. In recent years, modern housing and a care home for those who need respite or permanent medical help have been added to the existing site. From 2016, women were allowed to be admitted to these ranks, and the museum opens to the public with the support of the Museum of London. This side section here dates from 1825, and it was created so that the boys had somewhere to sit during service, no doubt under the watchful eye of their headmaster. The building survived the Reformation of 1535, possibly because Henry VIII had a use for it. He stored his tents, marquees and hunting equipment here. Religion has always played a very important part in daily life here, and brothers had to attend service at least twice a day up till 1907, or else they would have been fined. There are 3 rooms open to the public for free. They're this chapel, the Chapel Cloisters, and the museum. You can take a brother's tour, which run daily from 11 o'clock, and they take in a more extensive part of the Charterhouse. I did rock up at 11 o'clock purely by coincidence. I was in the area on business, but they weren't running a tour on this day. Maybe they didn't have enough people to take part, or maybe they didn't have anyone available to do the talk. The meeting up here, you can see in the cloisters, appears to be a private group. So I skip the cloisters for now and walk straight through to the museum. Novelist Anthony Powell quoted his romantic opinion of the building. This old chair has been in the Charterhouse forever, although nobody knows an awful lot about it. We have a timeline on the wall and it's going backwards, or backwards for Christmas, as my mother would have said. There's a section about the daily diet here, and wheat or small beer was offered daily to the brothers from the 17th century, as it was considered safer to drink than water. Their beer would have come from a brewery in Romford. Chairs like these would have been in the brothers' rooms. Further down there you can see the monitors' desk, where names of the previous monitors would have been engraved into the woodwork. Monitors who were disliked would have had their names scratched out by other boys. The school was originally intended to educate 40 boys, but it reached above and beyond expectations and became a well-known public school. The site sits on a burial ground, and no doubt ghostly stories made their way into the school magazine. Here we have a toasting fork. We had one of these. We had open fires in our house. Following the dissolution of the monasteries, the house was sold to Sir Edward North in 1545. He rebuilt the buildings as a large courtyard mansion and renamed it Howard House. Here we have a body cast in plaster. Now here we have a Eucharist cup and a communion cup. More about them later. A money chest and a plaster decoration above it. Sir Edward North made a banqueting hall out of a church, and both Elizabeth I and James I held court here. We have secrets hidden in here. It's very interactive. I thought this was a cowpat, but it's not. It's bellows. And I don't think that's stained glass either. That looks more like painted glass. This depicts the water system for the monastery. It's circa 1431. Following the Reformation, there was some distinction between the Catholic Eucharist cup to the fore of the picture and the Church of England Communion cup to the rear, next to an old chunk of chapel. This sculpture is late 15th century and it's of St. Catherine. Don't forget to check out my blog. I will always be a writer before anything else. Now we come to my favourite part. These lights are in a section dedicated to the Black Death. The Black Death was a bubonic plague pandemic, and it occurred throughout Europe between 1346 and 1353. This site was a burial ground from 1348. 25 skeletons were unearthed during the construction of Crossrail in Charterhouse Square in 2013. Mating Hare was one of them. He's a Black Death victim. You have to really look in places like these, and I'm finding the floors, the ceilings and the old chunks of wall just as interesting as some of the artefacts on display. The section here to the right, it tells you what monks got up to during the day. They spent their time in solitary prayer or taking part in devotional work. They copied books and manuscripts. Yes, little Miss Macabre had to come back and take a look at him. One last look at the cowpat bellows and stained stroke painted glass window. Isn't that creak a bit creepy? I'm glad the museum is interactive though, it makes it interesting. Or more interesting. Back down the museum gallery. A couple of the old schoolboys include William Makepeace Thackeray. He wrote Vanity Fair. I love that book. Also Peter Baden-Powell. He founded the Scouting movement. My final port of call was the Chapel Cloister. I think it's my favourite part of what I saw today. Looking out over the front garden. A monk's garb. A very thick and very old door. Or rather what's left of it. Half a door. It's actually a shame that the screen to the right is there. Behind there is a plaque dedicated to William and Makepeace Thackeray. We have a memorial at this end. In here are details of Thomas Sutton's will. Architecturally, a cloister connects the various buildings of a monastery to the chapel by means of a covered walkway. Here we are leaving and going outside past the beautiful medieval-styled garden. Looking up at the tower. And at the front here we have a model of the Charterhouse. I'm going to take you for a wander around Charterhouse Square. To an opening just off to the right, we can get a bit of a gawp behind the rest of the buildings. The three that we've seen today are only a part of what you can see. You can only see the rest on a tour though, which I wasn't able to do today. This postbox has VR on it, which means it was erected during Queen Victoria's reign. Victoria Regina. We're just going to have a walk through here. And peering around this wall, here's some of the rest of the building. It is rather extensive and there's plenty more to see if you get the chance. If you want to do just the 3 rooms though, it's certainly worth half an hour to an hour of your time. I do love the gate to the Charterhouse. It has an almost Art Nouveau feel about it. And the white building just to the right of that is the Charterhouse tea room. May blossom when it looks like spring has sprung. Finally, the weather's been quite nasty recently. How British of me to wax lyrical about the weather. There's the Barbican Tower up there. I do love this part of London as you get the really old juxtaposed against the modern. The whole of the Barbican estate is a good example of brutalist architecture. I want to take you around to the curvy Art Deco building at the front though. I love this place. When I get to be a rich author or a rich vlogger, or even if I win the lottery, I'm going to buy a flat there. It's known as Flowing Court. You might know it as Whitehaven Mansions though. It stands in for Hercule Poirot's home in the TV adaptation of Agatha Christie's series. That's a version starring David Suchet as Hercule Poirot. I love it. Those curvy windows are just so sensual. I always call this little building in Charterhouse Square the Summer House. Having a foliage-covered look over the square. It's nice to see a red phone box, and I just had to check and see if it was working. Alas, it wasn't. A final look over Charterhouse Square. I've just got to show you this little building known as the Cottage. It's 3 Haynes Street. Now Haynes Street was built between 1873 and 1874, but Crossrail plans meant it was scheduled to be demolished. When the scaffolding came down though, the building was still here, so obviously they've decided to save it. It doesn't look very lived in though. We're now walking up to the Old Red Cow pub with Farringdon Station to the right. Thank you for watching, and I do hope you've enjoyed the video. We are now entering the City of London, otherwise known as the Square Mile. Here are its boundary markers, these black octagonal bollards with red star collars and white lemon squeezer tops.
Come and join me again for another miscellaneous adventure. As always, don't forget to hit like, don't forget to hit subscribe and click on the notifications bell. Ta-ta for now.